We're looking into post-budget productivity in public service delivery. That's the conversation that we're having this hour. So the budget was read, but guess what? Doesn't mean that everybody then retreats to their holes and goes to sleep. That there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done to ensure that these things actually happen. We know that it's still up for debate. There's still discussions that are happening, but that we know that implementation is something that's going to have to come through to make this budget effective. To have this conversation with us this morning, CPA Kithinji Kiragu is the chairperson of the Intergovernmental Relations Technical Committee, and he's in the hot seat this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, madam.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Thank you for being here with us.
Asante.
We're going to go into this conversation. It's a big one, but before we do that, Dennis goes around the African country, every continent every week. He comes back from a particular African country with their proverbs. We would love to get your interpretation of that.
Yes. Okay. Today we are in Guinea-Bissau. Capital is Bissau. It is a country that has an archipelago, right? And with that is several islands within the country. Right. And one thing that stands out as well is the fact that they are huge in mangrove farming, which helps in cleaning the water systems as well, just making sure that the sea creatures as well have their good day. And when we talk about sea creatures, they have hippos that swim in salty water. So if you wanted to travel the country, that is one thing to go experience. But let's go to the proverb. The moon moves slowly, but it crosses the whole sky. The moon moves slowly, but it crosses the whole sky. How would you interpret it? What do you think people from Guinea-Bissau are saying?
I suppose they are saying that, to achieve the ends, to even to conquer the world, is not so much of speed as much as the tenacity which you exercise, to keep on going. And therefore, you'll be able to transverse all the obstacles, all the problems which keep you on slow speed. And ultimately, you achieve your goal as long as you keep going.
Just keep going.
Just keep going.
Yeah. Well said.
Kabisa. So, the budget is more than just the cabinet secretary reading the budget policy statement before Parliament on Thursday. But then after that he's done, that's when the second part of the real work continues. Right. In terms of the implementation of a lot of those policies that have been set out. We also know that it still continues in deliberation in Parliament, and that there are very many interest groups that are still having conversations about what they want changed in the finance bill before it actually becomes an act. It's not too far from now because the new financial year kicks in on the 1st of July. So there are about 2 weeks to have everything done and dusted. But then there's also the implementation process that takes place through the fiscal year.
Right.
Now, what exactly does all of this entail? What's next, essentially, in terms of moves?
I think what is next is, of course, the budget itself, ideally, is backed by plans. It is about, the budget is about implementing the plans which have been laid down. The budget, therefore, once it is passed, it entails at every level preparing work plans to execute the budget for that financial year. Some of it has to do with, of course, completing programs and projects which are already ongoing. But it means, therefore, now it says rolling your sleeves and getting on to do the things which are required, and the money then is dispersed following the activities which you have planned to do. That, I think, is the essentials of what's going to happen, and then, of course, there is oversight by others whether that which was agreed is going to be spent. In terms of the intervening period, there is not going to be a lot of room for change in the budget. Of course, some people are arguing about the case for that there is too much taxation. Others, of course, would also want to see certain projects and programs brought into it. But, one of the important things to remember is that the budget preparation process began in August of last year for the budget, which will begin in July. So, a lot of activities have gone in, a lot of haggling has gone in to get into the figures that we have at the moment. Therefore, really, short of a national crisis, there cannot be much of a change at the moment. Yes.
But even now, as we talk about the budget that then is before the as you talk about the budget that now is before Parliament, right, there is further discussions or further changes that would come out of the parliamentary process. And with that, then, many Kenyans are asking the question, with the budget that we have, there has to be return on investment, because those who are saying we are being overtaxed, but we will pay the tax anyhow. Should the powers that be, that would be Parliament and the government, ensure that Kenyans get value for money, return on investment, for the noise to go down?
Okay. First of all, the announcement, the pronouncement of the budget this week or this last week for Kenya is close to a formality, as contrasted to the budgets of the other East African countries. Because our constitution changed the way we prepare our budget. And therefore, early in the year, the Treasury and other institutions like the Commission for Revenue Allocation prepared figures. They submitted them to Parliament. Therefore, the budget we are looking on now has been cooked between especially Treasury and Parliament, not Treasury alone. In the old times, the budget was done by Treasury, and then Parliament came to debate it. And that is what is happening in the other East African countries. That the budget was done by the National Treasury or by the Ministry of Finance and Planning in those other countries, and then the Treasury, then the Parliament has come to look at those figures and change them and so on. But this budget is essentially also a budget from Parliament.
Okay.
And that makes a lot of difference.
Yeah.
Yes.
When you say it's a budget from Parliament, expound on that a little bit.
As I say, because under the Constitution, Parliament, under the current Constitution, Parliament of Kenya has a primary responsibility for preparing the budget. And that's why we have even a parliamentary budget committee. And budget office and so forth. In the old days, in the more days of Kibaki and before, before we had the new constitution, Parliament had very little inputs into the initial drafting of the budget. It was the work of technocrats in the Ministry of Finance then, or the National Treasury as we call it today. And therefore Parliament was not privy to the things which are going to be presented by the Cabinet Secretary. But these times, it is Parliament which looks at the figures, and if you follow the debate, it is parliamentary committees which actually come up with the figures of the budget. Yes.
As you say that, we can't run away from the fact that the heads of these committees are highly political appointments.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That the previous head of the budget committee is actually in Parliament today complaining about some of the budgetary allocations that have been made. The current head of the budget committee can also be seen as a highly political position. Now, how do you divorce the brick and mortar when it comes to the numbers that are needed to run the country and the position, which is why I asked about how is it a parliamentary budget? And you said, well, the committees are responsible for putting the numbers together. How do you divorce the brick and mortar where government needs money to do 1, 2, 3 and the leaning that a committee would take based on the fact that its head is a political position?
First, let's agree that not just in Kenya, but in all dispensations across the world, the budget is the budget making is a very political thing.
Yes.
Because the allocation of resources are very politicized process. And anyway, politics is a lot of times about sharing of resources.
Or taking
Therefore, there was no time when there was no politics involved. What I want to say is that one of the ideas then, actually, in the new constitution was to make sure that the political inputs are there early enough, because there was no trust that the national treasury will do the balancing act. Therefore, the political haggling for the Kenyan budget was made to be an early process. Instead of an after process after the technical people have done the figures. But of course, in all these things, of course, the institutions work together. Parliament works with the National Treasury and so on. And of course, juxtaposed in all that is the president as head of state. Now we are not then talking about him even just being head of government; he's also head of state. So so there is these figures are worked out between all those parties, and it is never going to be a situation where everybody, or in fact, none of those parties probably happy enough with the budget. I think that's what I can say. Okay. Therefore, in a sense, also the budget also reflects the balances of power and so forth. Yes.
At the end of the line is, as the reflection of balances in terms of power does exist, there is also the balance where Kenyans as well must get involved in the preparation of the budget.
Yes.
That is why the process starts in August and ends in perhaps June the following year. But in that process, then there is the component of Kenyans being involved that has always been a problem, where Kenyans say, we have not been involved as expected. Public participation has not met the threshold, according to us, for us to say we accept the process or not. Is that something that then gives credence to how politics is huge in the preparation of the budget, as opposed to wananchi as well being part and parcel of the process?
Okay. Of course, the issue of public participation is very much interested in our constitution, but it just made things a little bit more complicated. More complicated in the sense that even as we have public participation, let's not forget that Parliament actually represents the public. And that's why we elect leaders, okay, to go and represent our interest. So if the leaders have the trust of the people, public participation becomes a less debatable point. And I say that deliberately because, in all these other countries, when Britain, when America, when China, when Russia, when Germany are making their budgets, what you try to do in Kenya does not happen in those other places. And even in the countries of the region, it doesn't happen. Therefore, the whole issue of public participation partly has had to do with, restoring trust in the institutions, which is what I think was the aspiration of the designers of the Constitution. It was a part of bringing back trust to the whole process. Now, obviously, again, the issue is how extensive, how deep is public participation. It in itself is an expensive activity, not just in terms of money, but even in terms of the people who are supposed to do that process. But also, of course, the process, how effective is the process and so forth. So it is difficult to achieve, shall we say, total public satisfaction in terms of public participation. And as I say, it is really part of the unique complexities in the implementation of the Kenyan Constitution.
Should it worry those in power that Kenyans, despite having elected members of parliament to represent them in that house through delegated responsibility, that Kenyans don't trust these individuals to do a thorough job and demand to be in those spaces to look at the fine details that their elected members of parliament are working on? Why do I say that? Because Kenyans today will say these individuals have gone into a certain room to make decisions for us, forgetting that they are the ones who elected them. Does that paint a picture of lack of trust?
Well, it does. I think, to be honest, the absence of trust has less to do with the budget than more to do with how the budget is, people see the budget, resources being used and so forth. So it is more or less it is less of the process, but more so of the results that people expect out of the budget. And therefore, as I say, in the current prevailing environment, it may be that, again, in the kind of season we are in now, which is very political and toxically political, then, that mistrust is to be there. And of course, again, let's go back again to the whole issue of representation. Of course, there is parliament, and then, of course, there are these civil society organizations. Okay, and because of course the ordinary person, other than when you people go on in the streets and start interviewing them, they don't really have a chance because even when we talk about the forums for public participation, you have to ask yourself who actually is got the moment to go there. It's not Wanchiko really or Atieno has really the opportunity, to go to that place in that town hall and make their voice heard. It would need, first of all, there would need to be more mobilization than happens at the moment. Number two, there would be need for more time. These people would need to be in account, for example, for a week, really to get enough of what you would call a representative sample of people who are talking. So so it's a dilemma which I don't think is easy to address.
So going in, the people are not represented. Coming out of the thing, the people are not represented. So where exactly are the people represented? In a budget which is made by members of parliament whose primary role is to represent the people. This is vis-a-vis a conversation that is in the public at the moment, that the members of parliament that are currently in session are doing the bidding for the executive to a large extent. How do you play those things? Those are realities, and that's the thing about how government policy and politics play one against another.
Okay, sometimes we have to look at this lens. Parliament is an institution for democracy. Kenya did not invent democracy. Kenya has inherited democracy, and even you look at the constitution, we have copied many things from other dispensations.
Indeed.
But let us agree, even in a place like US, okay, the budget, if you look very clearly, is not very different between Kenya and America in terms of how the budget issues go, because or in any country, even in Britain, there's always the ruling party with its members of parliament, okay? And that is how the democracy is supposed to work. Therefore, the ruling party with its parliamentary group, okay, generally speaking, drive the budget in any country.
Within the law.
Within the law, for sure. Within the law, that is why the budget is going to be debated in parliament, so that the Finance Act is moved. Now, within that law, to the extent that the ruling party has majority, and they have also the leadership of the country, in any country, then the budget is passed on the basis of that majority. That is the essence of democracy.
Yeah.
Yes.
When you talk about the budget and further implementations that would see then the budget come into effect, there would be a at the end of the tail would be Kenyans being able to access services, so healthcare as stipulated in the budget, education as stipulated in the budget, which would be development as well as stipulated in the budget. But what Kenya has been treated to for a very long time has been, we have this budget, but nothing in that budget can we see on ground. We can't feel anything coming out of that budget. Is that a concern then? Because that would say is why Kenyans look at the process of making that budget and there is nothing to show.
Well, let me say, obviously, that is an extreme perspective. An extreme perspective in that, for example, you have all schools in Kenya, right? You have several million Kenyan children. I think more than 10 million Kenyan children in school. They have teachers who are in several 100,000. I think at the moment we have about 400,000 teachers. They are being paid from that budget. You have all those hospitals and so on. They may not be doing the perfect service, but they are also staffed with nurses. They may not have all the medicine, but there is medicine. Okay? So, so there you cannot, and we are driving on roads built with Kenyan taxpayers' money, and they are being maintained by Kenyan taxpayers' money. There are many water systems which are operating in the country. Again, they are staffed, they have been developed. So you can only say it is not enough, but you cannot say nothing is being done with the budget.
Does quality, when it comes to budgets, matter? Because when, say, we have put in place budget, say, 800 billion shillings that goes into education.
Yes.
And these 800 billion shillings that goes into education, there is salaries where teachers, like you said rightfully so, are being paid.
Yes.
There is 100,000 teachers who are supposed to, say, be enrolled into the same, and based off the budget statement that was given is they are supposed to be into to be absorbed.
Yes.
If they are not absorbed according to the policy that we had, number one, all capitation that has been set aside that goes into schools and does not get there on time, there is pending bills in schools. Should that be a factor of concerns coming from Kenyans when they see they are being asked to pay for money for their children to be in school, despite of the fact that there is budget, there is allocation, just that money has not got into schools? Should that be a concern in terms of quality that we get from the budget?
For sure. Well, let's put it this way. And that is part of the reason why we have this productivity, performance and productivity conference. For sure, the money is there, the teachers are there, the nurses are there, the facilities are there, the water pipes are there, the water pumps are working and so on. But we don't get the best out of those resources for many different reasons. But I think, again, if you think about it, it is not like our budget, even with the best of intentions, and that I'm expressing partly as a personal view, for the things which our constitution promises all Kenyans, for the things which we politically pledge to all Kenyans, we don't have sufficient public resources. That is a simple truth. And therefore, there will always be gaps in terms of service delivery here and there. But the challenge for us is for those resources which we have, human and non-human, financial and human and other resources, the most important thing is for us to make the best use of those resources.
Are we?
We are not, which is why we have the National Performance and Productivity Conference this week.
What are the reasons why the resources that are available in Kenya are not being used optimally for government policy and implementation?
There are many reasons. One is that you need good systems for service delivery.
Okay.
And having those good systems for good service delivery, it is personnel. It is the modalities by which those personnel will be applied. It is the facilities which complement that personnel. So, for example, it is one thing having a doctor and then that doctor not having a stethoscope. There was a time when Kenya was very bad, doctors had not stethoscopes, but these days they have stethoscopes.
Thank God for so mercies.
I still can remember those times myself. So it is bringing all those things together and planning on how using them you are going to do the best with the resources you have to deliver services. And the process of getting all those things together, if one of them is not there, for example, therefore, if you have doctors and nurses and so on, and hospital facilities, but then also you have not given them a reasonable complement of medical supplies. Are we together? Then obviously that doctor and that nurse is not effectively utilized.
Okay.
They are not as productive as they can be. On the other hand, if that doctor is that nurse, although you are paying them to be in the office, they are not in the office, then also you not get the results that you want to have.
So these things are known, right? These things that you talk about. Improper, use of resources that are available, lack of, resources to do certain things. And in this case, I mean, what you've mentioned, people just not showing up in the office. Those are problems. So what we are saying essentially is that there are known problems as to why a 4.82 trillion shilling budget that was announced last week will not be properly implemented in the next year. They are known. These issues are known. They're known.
They are known.
Okay.
They are known. Two things. First is that, partly the public service represents also what is partly in the society in which we operate in. So, but also partly it has to do with the problems which have cropped up, what I would call maladies, which have cropped into the public service over time. And it is not unusual that things go well and then the things don't go well. So the problems are known. The remedies are not, unfortunately, they are not a single bullet activity that you can say, let it happen, and it happens.
But why? I'm sorry. I want to understand, because we're talking about where the rubber meets the road here. This is bread and butter. Because here we are saying that we see the reasons that people who are not willing or ready, because you talk about political will, to get something done. And we can see the problem. We are looking at the problem. But we're still saying, well, perhaps there needs to be another, intergalactic panacea to sort out this thing, where there are people seated who can solve a problem. You've mentioned systems. Well, systems are created and maintained by people. So what is the problem in saying, well, here's something that has not worked? And I think we try to complicate it sometimes without just looking at it simply and saying, this thing is not working under this individual or this set of people. But we seem to want to romanticize the idea of something going bad, and then we can say it's gone bad. But here it says that a place for implementation, and we just can't seem to do it and want to just wallow around in that problem like a pig in the mud. Why?
First, because I think the solutions are a little more complex. I think you are seeking for a simple solution, but there is no very simple solution. First, let's take the people themselves, okay? You got to get them in a situation where they have an incentive, they have a sense of either their culture or the incentives and sanctions you put on them. Make them, for example, those who don't go to work in good time, go to work in time. Okay, one thing. And I think you have seen the minister for public service the other day, Honorable Roko, going around a place and finding nobody is in the office or 2 officers in the office in our establishment. So that is first thing. The second thing is that these people, as I said, have got to have very clear targets of what they need to achieve. But for them to achieve also, you need to have a carrot and stick for them in sanctions, incentives
to do their
sanctions.
job.
Eh?
If they're not doing it for free, to do their job, must you incentivize people to do their job?
Part of the reason you work to do your job today were 2 reasons. One was you have the motivation to do this job yourself. You are happy to come to this office. Are we together?
Well, the jury is still up, but okay.
And number 2 is that also you are compensated for being there. Are we together? So that what we are talking about is making sure that they have the motivation, they have every reason, therefore, to have the discipline to work. That is one aspect of it. That discipline has also to do with the culture in the organization and so forth. So those are issues which have to be addressed. But let's then go to the second thing about the systems. Okay, you have probably have been doing something using, old systems. New systems require new technologies need new facilities and so forth. It is not such a serious problem now, for example, getting computers in the ways. But we have come a long way to a point where, for example, everything was manual and everything was computers. So those things don't happen overnight. They take time to happen. Then, of course, even then with the human person, with the facility and so forth, you probably need day-to-day complementary resources. If it is health, you need day-to-day complementary resources in terms of medical supplies, for example. If it is teaching, in that classroom, there are things which you need. The children themselves need maybe also to be helped to come to school and have the discipline to do it and so. So there are quite a number of things you have to look at. And the key thing is for those who are managing those funds, those facilities, those who are managing the staff, for the staff themselves, all those people have to gel into an organization which actually performs to deliver what the resources have been budgeted for.
When you look at the public service sector, there is equally the private and corporate life that there is in the country, where the things that you just mentioned, where you have to show up at work, and there is compensation at the end of it all, you must want to come here. There is check-in and check-out facilities that a cabinet secretary will have to go to stations to encourage people to come to work. That goes to show that perhaps then value for money is not being received from the end of Mwananchi, because if someone doesn't come to work, what do? You get rid of them. You get people who want to work, and that would be a conversation in the country today, that we know there are problems. Individuals don't show up, that we have to show up to encourage them to come to work. One would say we're shooting ourselves in the foot, because we are wasting time on things that we have solutions for. It is not rocket science. And even then, when we talk about public participating in all these issues, I would give you an example. When a certain lady set up a portal where Kenyans could have discussions, the members of parliament, and give their views on public participation, it is still the very same government that went and shot down that idea. She was arrested. So in all this, then one asks the question, is there political goodwill in ensuring that even when we have budgets and implementations of the same, that Kenyans get value out of that?
And that issue about political goodwill, my view, and it is reflected by what you just said, the minister is going to check whether office, staff are in office. So I don't think we can question the issue of political goodwill to get services delivered. Okay? I don't think we can, because that's why the minister left Nairobi and went to a remote, relatively distant county from Nairobi, okay, to check whether people are working.
Were those people let go, or are they still in the system?
Now, let go is a very simple thing in private sector. But the public sector people have quite some insulation because also of course again the issue of trust that if you left it to politicians, people might be sacked who should not be sacked. And therefore, there is insulation. There is a process by which you would have to get a public servant off the payroll and so forth. But also, by the time you are getting him off the payroll, you had better be sure that the next Kenyan you get is of a better culture and better discipline than the one who you are sacking. So probably it is better to see how best you can get the ones who are there now to work well.
CPA, are we giving excuses for bad culture to continue in public sector systems? Because that right there is an example of why job is not done. Are we giving excuses with political undertones for things that honestly shouldn't just happen, especially in public sector?
No, we are not giving excuses. The reason why we have a performance and productivity, national performance and productivity conference this week is because we cannot afford those excuses. That for Kenya to achieve a socio-economic transformation at an acceptable rate, we have to change the way we are doing things. We have to make sure that we are more productive. We have to make sure that that budget actually delivers to Kenya on a socio-economic transformation trajectory. Therefore, there are no excuses. Therefore, in the conference, we are going to talk about the culture of public servants and what do we need to do to address it. In the conference, we are going to talk about how do we set targets, how do we ensure that we hold public officers accountable for delivery against the resources that have been provided for them. And those deliverables, not in terms of the fact that they have spent money and they have gone to this and that activity, but actually because we can see there are real improvements in the services which are provided to Kenyans. And therefore, setting targets for them, getting sure that those targets are realistic, that they are not just, written on paper, but they are real, and we hold them accountable for those resources. So essentially, the sense of the conference we are going to is to actually to address the concerns which we are putting up.
Right. So the budget process starts around the 30th of August, and it goes well through until April. And so and we know that the budget then is delivered and implemented through the different government departments, otherwise known as ministries. Yes. And under those ministries, there are state departments divided, and that's how everybody gets their work done.
Yes.
Now the budget seeps through all of this,
and then the county government, the county governments also, some of them have also ministries and agencies,
and that's why they have their CACs and such.
Correct.
Now, these departments submit budgets to their ministries of what they want to do in the next year.
Yes.
These are what are taken to Treasury. Treasury now crunches the numbers, they figure it out, and that all comes together to form the budget statement.
Right.
That's the work essentially that they're going to do for the next fiscal year.
Right.
What happens when, as is a lot of times the case, when the money that has been requested and essentially approved by the very fact that the budget statement has been given, then does not reach these line ministries?
Let me say, it may not reach, the total amount may not reach the ministries if there is a revenue shortfall. Are we together? If there is a revenue shortfall, then all the money cannot get there. And sometimes also, as you have seen often, sometimes the money is not collected in good time, and therefore there are delays in dispersing that money. Those are issues, of course, which are also pertinent to the whole issue of how the budget is implemented.
So what happens?
Well, what happens, of course, to the extent that they haven't received the money, it means, therefore, then they don't do what was expected of them. And unfortunately, if therefore they haven't also received the money, it means, therefore, they are not being utilized. The money we are paying them is not being well utilized because it means they are not as active as they are supposed to be.
So efficiency is unmet.
Yes, so that is why it is important that everything works in the unison, in a harmonious way, in a coordinated manner. That if you have got staff, you got to give them the facilities. You got to give them the budget. You got to give them the resources to make sure that they provide.
Okay. Is there the acknowledgement of two things? Number one, debt and corruption, which are the two stifling vices towards a revenue problem that Kenya has at the moment. Play this vis-a-vis the efficiency problem that's obviously one that is brought about by the lack of resources that you mentioned. That without those two things, do you see the possibility of there being adequate resources to get the job done and to meet efficiency, which happens to be one of the first things that you mentioned when we started to speak?
You said the corruption and?
Debt.
Now, debt cannot be put in the same context with the corruption.
Why not?
Debt is to do with the money which you have taken, and ideally you should have used it to invest in the facilities which make the economy perform better. Are we together?
Yes.
So, so it is not a question of avoiding debt. It's a question of taking debt and using those resources
For the right purpose.
for the right purpose.
Now, allow me to show you where then I make the connection between the two.
Yes.
Because if you borrow money, as Kenya has allowed you to do constitutionally,
Yes.
and it is applied to the wrong purpose, which is not development or
Yes.
meeting a budget shortfall in the short term,
Yes.
then you have abrogated the law. The same thing you have done with corruption, where you have taken money that was meant for a particular thing and you have diverted it. So those two vices, borrowing illegally, because when you take money for a development project and it doesn't go to that development project,
Yes.
it has gone to the wrong place, yes?
It's illegal.
I'm just assuming that it's illegal, or is it okay?
That to me, what you are describing is also a form of corruption. Because, of course, if the money has been diverted, it can only be diverted.
I'm glad we are together.
All right.
Right.
It's criminal, in fact.
Absolutely.
Are we together?
100%.
Okay.
So how do you deal with those two issues vis-a-vis the efficiency problem that you had previously mentioned?
I'll say this to you from a personal perspective. The problem of, as I said, therefore, let us agree, diversion of money and corruption are sisters. They cannot be. They are the same thing. Or two sides of the same coin.
Okay.
Are we together?
Yes.
This is a problem which has to. I would say corruption. I think everybody agrees is endemic in this country, especially in the public service. And there has to, for Kenya to move forward at the necessary rate of socioeconomic transformation, this has to be addressed. Now, how it is to be addressed is, we have institutions which are supposed to address it. And they probably would be best positioned to, EACC should be best, is best. That's why we have EACC anyway. EACC is the one which needs to help us to address this problem.
Okay.
And I think I should not attempt to, to substitute for the thing which I suppose goes on a daily basis within EACC on how to address the problem of corruption.
Yep.
But it is endemic, and it is a problem which Kenya has to address for sustainable socio-economic transformation.
When it comes to the development of the budget, you find every other agency and ministry is given the allocation or proposals on how they would be funded. But here we are talking about now the appropriation and the disbursement of these funds. You find there is an agency, there is a government-aligned ministry that said we need X amount for us to be able to do XYZ. Then you have another institution within the same government who have spent all their funds, they've asked for supplementary, and they have been given. Is there fairness in the implementation of this budget when you have a line ministry that has not received their allocation, yet you have a ministry that has overspent and are even asking for supplementary. Is there fairness in the implementation of the budget?
It can happen for many different reasons. And it is not always the case, so I'm not going to say it is legitimate in every case. But in any government, it can happen. For example, if we during the COVID, let's say for example, okay, obviously there was need to move resources from some line ministry so that they could handle the crisis that we had. But also it can happen in terms of many strategic considerations, even short-term strategic considerations. For example, you are planning to do roads infrastructure, okay? And at the same time, you also plan to do water supply system, okay? Then there are problems, say in the procurement process and so forth. And certain projects don't take place because they have not been prepared for. Then obviously you can use those resources to do something else. So the problem is not the issue of, because as I said, it's not like for anything, almost anything that we want to do in this country, we have enough resources. Therefore, there can always be something else to be done with the money instead of it lying idle.
How fair is it when you see there is a department that has been given, say, extra allocation for entertainment and traveling, when there is an agency somewhere that needs money, say, to buy drugs? Where is fairness in implementation of that budget?
I think traveling is one thing, entertainment is another. I would like to separate the two. I would like to think that nobody is going to be denied money so that others can entertain. That would be unethical, to say the least.
Yeah.
But I think, if you are traveling to look for resources, okay, which are not available, then of course, if the budget for traveling to look for those resources is not available, then, and that, the budget is not actually sometimes, in certain ways, it is not very different from the way we manage our own personal resources at a personal level. That, that now, this money was going to pay part of the first installment of fees, but you need to do something else so that the money will be available to pay the food fees for the term. Then you can also therefore do an adjustment.
Okay. So this week, you look into how efficiency is going to then be mapped and actually ensured, at least for the next 12 months coming in from the 1st of July. What are your hopes for the year? I'm not even talking about the hopes for the conference. What are your hopes for the year that you can actually see that this is actually done as the committee and other committees that sit?
First of all, in the context of the National Performance and Productivity Conference, we are not looking at things only in the context of the next 1 year. We are thinking what Kenya needs to achieve in the next 5+ years. Because, as I said, there is no magic bullet to the transformation of the public service to perform better, to be more productive. It's going to take time. But what we anticipate is that in the coming financial year, we will start having better planning for the use of resources. And therefore, what we want officers not just to tell us that, say like in education that, we distributed resources to the for education. We want to also to have a sense that actually that we have planned that students are going to be more in class and they are going to be taught better.
Amen. Okay.
That is what we call outcome.
Okay.
And that the children out of those classes have better literacy than they had before.
Yes.
So that is what we call those results, we call those outcomes. As opposed to saying, you have used the money to do this and this, but we don't know whether they have brought us any results.
Indeed.
So one of the things which we are pushing for now is to go to a situation where public resources, the human resource, the facilities, the materials that are available from the budget that is provided are being seen in the context of actual improvements in the services that Wananchi have received.
That's one thing that everybody is looking for. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. CPA Kithinji Kiragu is the chairperson of the Intergovernmental Relations Technical Committee and has been our guest this hour for us to look at some of these pertinent issues. Asante sana for being here.
Nashukuru sana pia. Thank you very much for this morning.
Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.